The cold wind of the Atlanta MARTA platform cut through the morning air as Black Amara Ward, 28, clutched her 6-year-old son, Black Miles Ward, against her chest. She was trying to disappear into the crowd when she heard a deep, familiar voice call out her name. Amara? Amara Ward, is that you? She froze and turned to see her father, Black Vernon Ward, 58, standing a few feet away. It had been 2 months since she last saw him. 2 months of ignoring his calls and making excuses about being tired or too busy. Now, he was right in front of her, reading her life through the exhaustion on her face. He took in everything: her worn-out gray puffer coat with the torn pocket, the cheap boots with thin soles, Miles's too small snowsuit, her hollow cheeks, and trembling hands. Baby girl, what happened to your car? I bought you that Kia SUV for your birthday last year. Amara looked down. I sold it. I needed the cash. For what? His tone hardened. Amara, talk to me. You look like you haven't slept in weeks. Why aren't you answering my calls? Where's Darnell? Her eyes filled with tears. For 2 months, she had held everything in enduring demands, insults, and fear. Now, standing before her father, she couldn't hide anymore. Dad, can we go somewhere private? They went into a small cafe near the station called Basil and Brew, where the air smelled of coffee and cinnamon. Vernon ordered apple juice and a cookie for Miles, then sat across from his daughter and held her hands. Tell me everything, he said. Amara took a shaky breath and told him everything. How after Miles was born, her mother-in-law, Black Loretta Jenkins, 54, started visiting more often. At first, it was caring advice, then criticism, then control. When Loretta discovered that Amara's 2-bedroom condo downtown, her inheritance from her grandmother, was entirely in her name, she demanded that Amara sign it over for Miles's future. Amara refused, and that was when the nightmare began. She described the manipulation, the threats, the constant pressure. Loretta and her brother-in-law, Black Preston Jenkins, 32, had taken control of her finances, monitoring her phone and isolating her. Her husband, Black Darnell Ward, 33, instead of protecting her, handed over her paycheck to his mother. Vernon listened silently, his face hardening. A week after you refused to sign that deed, he said quietly, remember when your car windows were smashed outside your building? You told me it was random vandalism. Amara nodded. It wasn't random, he said. Her eyes widened. What do you mean? The next day, Loretta showed up at your apartment, sat down with tea, and asked, how's your daddy doing? Didn't she? Yes. She did. Vernon's jaw tightened. The calm, focused look in his eyes reminded Amara of the man who had once run field operations overseas, a man who never reacted, only planned. Listen to me carefully, he said. Before I retired, I was in Army intelligence. What they've done to you isn't just cruel, it's criminal. And I know exactly how to handle criminals. We're going to end this. He reached into his coat pocket and slid a small black phone across the table. This is encrypted. You'll contact me only through Signal? Keep acting normal. Let them think you're broken. Don't change anything until I tell you. For the first time in months, Amara felt something shift inside her, a spark of strength returning. Her father's eyes were steady, filled with determination and quiet promise. He wasn't just listening. He was already building a rescue. They finished their drinks in silence, and Miles laughed at the crumbs on his cookie. Amara looked at her son and then at her father. For the first time in months, her lips formed a real smile. When they stepped back into the cold daylight, Amara held Miles's hand tightly. The trains roared beneath the platform, and people rushed past, but for her, the noise faded. Inside her chest, something long buried stirred again. Not fear. Not panic. Hope. That same night, after leaving the cafe. Black Vernon Ward, 58, sat alone in his condo, the glow from the kitchen light falling over an open leather notebook. He began mapping out names, connections, and timelines with a precision only years in Army intelligence could teach. He listed Loretta Jenkins, 54, manipulative, controlling, driven by greed. Preston Jenkins, 32, her brother with 2 prior convictions for robbery and extortion, recently released but still active in the same criminal circle. Darnell Ward, 33, weak, easily influenced, afraid of his mother but not beyond saving if shown the truth. Below their names, he noted, Amara's forged work documents need forensic proof. CPS video verify montage. When his analysis was complete, he started calling old teammates. Solomon, it's Vernon. I need your help. Surveillance, tech setup, clean and silent. A brief pause, then Solomon replied, You know I'm in. Same rules? Exactly, Vernon answered. No traces, no noise. By midnight, he had assembled 4 men he trusted completely. Solomon Carter, former communications expert and master of covert electronics. Andrew Lewis, surveillance specialist with sharp instincts and patience. Owen Briggs, digital forensics analyst skilled at exposing forgery and manipulation. Malcolm Reed, retired detective with deep police connections and street sense. The next morning, their work began. Solomon tracked Loretta's movements, her morning coffee runs, grocery trips, and hair appointments. When she went shopping, he made his move. 15 minutes later, Loretta's condo was wired. Tiny microphones were hidden inside lamps, under furniture, and behind picture frames, transmitting clear audio to a neighboring apartment Vernon had rented as a base. Andrew tailed Preston, capturing every meeting and transaction. Within days, Vernon's desk was covered with photos showing Preston visiting known hustlers. Pawn shops at an unregistered warehouse. Owen analyzed the documents and the video. The signatures on Amara's paperwork were copied, the numbers edited, and the CPS video was a spliced fake made from different moments of Miles. His official report confirmed the evidence was fabricated and would stand in court. Malcolm worked through his police network, quietly gathering Preston's criminal record and tracing new extortion cases tied to him. It became clear Preston had never left his old habits behind. After 2 weeks, Vernon reviewed everything. The data was solid, the recordings damning. In one, Loretta's sharp voice filled the room. If that girl doesn't sign, we'll just push harder. Preston laughed in the background. Maybe another scare will make her think straight. Vernon listened without emotion. Though every word deepened his resolve, he turned to a new page in his notebook and wrote at the top, Operation Justice for Amara. Beneath it, he drew 4 numbered lines. 1. Marked money, traceable bills for evidence. Point 2. Psychological. Trap. Fake health scare to disarm the enemy. 3. Recruit Darnell, reveal manipulation, and turn him against them. 4. Final strike. Set the trap at the condo signing. He checked every detail twice. Every name, every contact, every backup plan. When he finally set the notebook aside, he knew exactly how the next moves would play out. This wasn't just a father protecting his daughter. It was an operative launching a mission. The war had begun, silent and precise, and Vernon Ward was already 3 steps ahead. The operation entered its first stage. Black Vernon Ward, 58, reviewed his notes, then executed Phase 1, the marked money. Using an old intelligence contact, he secured access to a batch of marked bills, real currency, but every serial number was logged in a confidential database. The plan was simple. Amara would hand over her next paycheck in those bills. Loretta would take the cash, pass part of it to her brother Preston, and the police would later find the marked bills during a raid. That single traceable link would prove extortion. Amara followed instructions exactly. Her next paycheck, $1,500, was withdrawn, counted, and handed to Darnell, who immediately gave it to his mother. Loretta Jenkins smiled as she counted the money. Good girl, Amara. See how smooth things go when you cooperate? Once you sign the condo, your problems will disappear. You'll live in peace. Amara kept her expression lifeless, pretending defeat, her hands folded on her lap. Inside, she was counting the days. With phase 1 complete, Vernon moved to phase 2, the psychological trap. He needed Loretta relaxed and arrogant enough to talk freely, so he decided to stage a medical crisis, a heart attack. Solomon arranged everything through a friendly doctor. There was a full hospital admission, 4 drips, medical records, everything authentic. Within hours, Loretta heard about it through Darnell. Seriously? His heart? She asked over the phone, reclining on her sofa. Yes, Darnell replied. He's in the hospital. Loretta exhaled slowly and lit a cigarette. Well, at his age, it's not surprising. Preston, sitting nearby, laughed. Maybe he'll die on his own, save us the trouble. Loretta shrugged. Let's just hope Amara stays quiet. Who's she going to complain to? Her dad's in the hospital, her husband's on my side, and I've got proof. She's not going anywhere. Every word of that conversation was recorded. Vernon listened from his apartment base, his face expressionless. Loretta had taken the bait perfectly. While she grew careless, Solomon gathered clean audio, and Andre's surveillance continued to build evidence. Preston's movements were consistent. Shady meetings, exchanges, late-night visits to unregistered addresses. Owen finalized his forensic reports, and Malcolm started liaising quietly with a local detective he trusted. Loretta's overconfidence was the final piece Vernon needed. In one recording, her voice was practically giddy. That woman's broken, Preston. Soon as she signs, I'll sell the condo, pay your lawyer, and still have change left over. We'll finally be free of her whining. Vernon closed the laptop, made a small note in his file, and looked at the wall map, pinned with red strings and notes. Everything is going to plan, he muttered. They're getting complacent. The groundwork was solid. The evidence was airtight. The predators had no idea they were already walking into a trap of their own making a week later. Black Malcolm Reed, 55, used his police contacts to arrange a quiet random check on Black Preston Jenkins, 32. The police arrived at Preston's apartment, expecting nothing more than minor trouble, but within an hour, everything Vernon had predicted came true. They found the marked bills from Amara's paycheck, a small quantity of drugs, and an unregistered handgun. Preston tried to talk his way out, claiming ignorance, but the serial numbers on the cash sealed his fate. He was handcuffed and taken away, while the neighbors watched through half-closed blinds. When news of the arrest reached Black Loretta Jenkins, 54, panic rippled through her like electricity. She paced her condo, chain-smoking, muttering to herself about betrayal. Who talked? Who told them? She whispered, her voice trembling. Her son, Black Darnell Ward, 33, checked Amara's phone, every text, every call, even her social media. Nothing suspicious, he reported. Her phone's clean. Loretta calmed slightly, though unease still flickered in her eyes. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was moving against her. Vernon decided it was time for phase 3 turning Darnell. Through Malcolm's connections, a trusted therapist who had once counseled Darnell reached out, inviting him to a neutral coffee shop for what seemed like a harmless conversation. Darnell agreed, unaware that the friend waiting to meet him was his father-in-law. When Darnell walked into the cafe and saw Vernon sitting in the corner, his face strained of color. You're supposed to be in the hospital, he stammered. Sit down, Vernon said calmly. We need to talk. Vernon placed a tablet on the table and hit play. Loretta's voice filled the air. That fool thinks she can refuse me. I'll squeeze her until she signs that condo over on her knees. Then Preston's voice followed. We should scare her one more time. Make sure she knows we're serious. Darnell's face went pale. That's not what it sounds like. Be quiet and listen. Vernon cut him off. Another clip played Loretta again, cold and dismissive. Darnell's such a doormat. I tell him, do this, do that, and he jumps. We broke Amara already. We'll sell the condo, split the money, and he'll get nothing. What does he need it for? He's useless anyway. Darnell dropped his head into his hands. Vernon leaned forward, voice low and steady. Do you understand what you've done? You helped destroy your own wife. You terrorized the mother of your child, and all for a woman who laughs at you behind your back. I thought it was for the family, Darnell murmured. What family? You turned your wife into a prisoner. You stole her inheritance. You're part of extortion, threats, and forgery. You're a criminal, Darnell. But you still have a choice. Vernon let the words hang before continuing. If you keep following your mother, you'll sit in a courtroom beside her. But if you help me, if you hand over your messages, her texts, her plans, you can testify and maybe, just maybe, rebuild something with your son. Darnell swallowed hard. What do you want from me? Everything, Vernon said firmly. Your messages with your mother, her discussions with Preston, her orders about Amara, and your own statement. You'll keep acting normal so she suspects nothing. If you refuse, I'll hand everything to the police. Preston's already in custody. The next arrest will be yours. Darnell stared at the table for a long time. Finally, his voice came out small. I'll give you the messages and my testimony. But please don't let Amara know how low I fell. She already knows, Vernon replied quietly. But help me, and your son might forgive you one day. That night, Darnell delivered everything. Screenshots, messages, voice notes. Vernon read each one carefully, Loretta's detailed plans to seize the condo, instructions to Darnell about controlling Amara, financial exchanges with Preston. The pattern was clear. Every thread documented. All that remained was the final strike. Loretta was already unraveling. Her brother's arrest had her on edge. Detectives were asking about the money's origin, and she couldn't find the leak. She still believed Vernon was bedridden and weak, and that Amara was broken. At dinner one night, Loretta snapped. This is dragging on too long. Tell her she has to sign this week. Preston needs a lawyer, and that condo will fetch $350,000 at least. Darnell nodded, secretly recording every word on a small device hidden in his jacket pocket. Yes, Mom, he said, forcing his tone to stay neutral. Loretta leaned in. If she hesitates, threaten her. Remind her about the daycare, or tell her we'll pay her father a hospital visit. She fold. When the conversation ended, Darnell sent the recording to Vernon through the secure channel. The pieces were all in place: audio, texts, marked money, forensic proof, and now a confession. The trap was ready. The next move would bring the entire operation to its end. Amara's phone buzzed with a new message on the secure line. Get ready. Tomorrow, tell Darnell you agree to sign. The day after, set the meeting with the attorney. It ends in 3 days. Hold tight. Her hands trembled as she read it, then steadied. 3 days. It felt impossibly close and somehow merciful. Vernon and his team moved with quiet precision. Malcolm quietly negotiated with the detective handling Preston's case, sharing enough evidence to pique his interest without revealing the whole plan. The detective listened, methodical and careful, then agreed the sting would work if a prosecutor signed off and an attorney at the closing knew how to document coercion properly. Vernon contacted a trusted real estate attorney. Black Victoria Carter explained the situation in neutral terms and got her on board. Miss Carter agreed to phrase her questions exactly as instructed and to make notes that would show duress if Loretta pushed or coerced Amara. Darnell went through the motions. When Amara told him she would sign the papers, His face registered a flash of shame, then flattened into an obedient calm. He called his mother. Loretta's triumphant laugh came through the line. Finally. I knew she'd break. Bring the original condo documents and we'll finalize everything at the attorney's office at 2 p.m. the day after tomorrow. Don't let her change her mind. Vernon, listening through Loretta's condo bug, recorded every word. Solomon confirmed he would be on location as requested. Loretta had asked for muscle to make sure Amara didn't back out. Vernon passed the intel along to Malcolm, who secured the detective's cooperation and arranged for a prosecutor to be present to authorize an immediate arrest if the evidence and behavior justified it. Every detail was rehearsed: the timing, who would enter and when, who would present the warrant, how the attorney would document the signs of coercion, because in operations like this, there was no room for improvisation. On the morning of the meeting, Amara moved through her routine with the practiced blankness her father had coached her to show. When Darnell asked if she was sure, she answered softly, "Yes, I can't keep living like this." He called Loretta and confirmed the appointment. Loretta's voice was silken steel as she instructed Darnell to make sure Amara brought the original documents. The attorney's office smelled of lemon polish and legal briefs. Sunlight cut across the conference table where Miss Victoria Carter sat, composed and professional. Amara arrived with her hands folded in her lap, eyes downcast, and Darnell at her side. Loretta entered with a measured gait and a companion, someone Vernon recognized from surveillance photos. A man who liked to stand a little too close when intimidation made its rounds. Miss Carter opened the meeting by asking routine questions, then shifted into the language Vernon had requested. Before we continue, Ms. Ward, I need to confirm that you are signing these documents voluntarily and without pressure. Are you freely choosing to transfer ownership of the condo? She waited, pen poised. Loretta's impatience cut in. She started interrupting, her voice sharp and insistent. The companion's presence was a low current of menace. Darnell looked away, fists clenched. Amara's hands shook, but she stayed the part, broken, desperate, defeated, until Miss Carter pressed again, more firmly, recording every hesitation, every glance, every coercive remark for the file. Loretta grew louder, dropping threats about daycare and whispers of the edited video, attempting to force Amara's signature. Her words were exactly the kind of coercion the team had documented for weeks. At that moment, Malcolm gave the prearranged signal. The detective moved in, followed by officers showing warrants and reading rights. Hearts raced in the small room. Loretta's face turned from triumph to disbelief. Solomon's companion stiffened, then reached into his jacket, too slow. Officers moved faster. Preston's influence could not save him now. Hands were cuffed. Solomon and Loretta were taken into custody while Miss Carter stood by and supplied the clear legal account of threats and duress. Darnell's confession and recorded messages were presented, neat and damning. Amara was asked for an official statement, and she answered, voice steadier than she felt, recounting the months of pressure and manipulation. Outside the building, Vernon met Amara with a tight, relieved embrace. The last threads of the nightmare were being cut. Preston remained in custody, Loretta was arrested, and the evidence marked money, recorded conversations, forensic reports stacked clean and incontrovertible. The detective and prosecutor prepared the necessary filings, and the legal machinery began to move. That evening, as the dust settled and the family started to breathe again, Vernon and Amara spoke quietly about what would follow: the court cases, the divorce paperwork, the custody arrangements, the long reclaiming of a life interrupted. The operation had done its job. The predators were documented, detained, and powerless now. All that remained was the slow work of repair and the knowledge that justice, at last, had been served. The air inside Attorney Victoria Carter's office was heavy with tension. Sunlight filtered across polished wood and stacks of legal papers, turning the quiet space into a stage. Black Amara Ward, 28, sat with her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Black Darnell Ward, 33, at her side. Across from them sat Black Loretta Jenkins, 54, poised in a tailored maroon suit that strained to hide her nerves. Behind her stood Black Solomon Carter, 42, her hired muscle, his eyes cold and watchful. Ms. Carter began calmly, her voice firm but polite. Before we continue, Ms. Ward, I must ask, are you transferring ownership of this property of your own free will? Has anyone threatened or pressured you? Amara kept her gaze lowered. No, she murmured. I'm doing this myself. Solomon coughed deliberately, the message clear. Loretta shifted in her seat, glancing toward him with a smirk. Miss Carter's sharp eyes caught it all, but continued professionally. Very well. Please hand over the documents, the deed, your ID, and the marriage certificate. Amara pulled a folder from her bag, her hands shaking so much she could barely keep the papers straight. Miss Carter began examining them, making small notes in the margins. Loretta fidgeted, her patience unraveling. Will this take long? She snapped. As long as necessary, Miss Carter replied smoothly. Ms. Ward, you do understand that after this transfer, you'll lose all ownership rights to your condo? I understand, Amara said softly. And you are prepared to do this? Yes, good. Then please sign here, here, and here. Amara took the pen, her fingers trembling uncontrollably. Loretta leaned forward, her voice cutting like a blade. Come on, girl. Don't drag it out. Amara signed once, then twice. When she reached the final signature line, she froze. Her breath quickened. What now? Loretta hissed. Sign it. Tears blurred Amara's vision. I don't know. Loretta slammed her palm on the table and grabbed Amara's arm. Did you forget what happens if you refuse? Don't test me. Mrs. Jenkins, Miss Carter said sharply, standing up. That's enough. You will not intimidate my client. Loretta spun toward her, fury flashing in her eyes. She's my daughter-in-law, not your client. She's backing out. She thinks she can just walk away. Solomon took a step forward, looming near the table. Miss Carter straightened, unflinching. Sit down, Mr. Carter, or I'll call security. Loretta tried to regain composure, her tone turning falsely sweet. Amara, honey, you know this is for your own good for Miles. If you don't sign, remember what we said about the daycare and CPS? Miss Carter's voice cut through the air. Are you threatening her? Loretta sneered. I'm explaining the consequences. Enough, Miss Carter said firmly, but Loretta ignored her and turned back to Amara. This is your last chance. Sign it now. The door burst open. 3 plainclothes officers entered, followed by Detective Malcolm Reed, 55, and 2 uniformed police officers. Loretta Jenkins, the detective announced, flashing his badge. Major Crimes Unit, you are under arrest for extortion, threats, and coercion in connection with the fraudulent property transfer. He turned to Solomon. Solomon Carter, you're also under arrest for complicity. Loretta went pale. What? This is a mistake. I didn't do anything. Detective Reed remained calm. We have recorded conversations, text messages, and witness testimony. You've been under investigation for weeks. He gestured to his team. Take them in. Solomon tried to rush the door, but was quickly restrained. Loretta screamed, Amara. Tell them you wanted to sign. Darnell, say something. Darnell sat motionless, eyes fixed on the table. Loretta grabbed his shoulder. Darnell, he finally looked up, voice hollow. I gave testimony, Mom. Everything. The threats, the blackmail, the forged documents, the attack on Grandpa. I told them all of it. Loretta staggered back, eyes wild. You betrayed me. You made me betray everyone I love, he said quietly. But not anymore. I won't be your puppet. Detective Reed showed the official warrant. Loretta Jenkins, you are charged under state law with extortion by an organized group involving threats and attempted fraud. The sentence carries 5 to 10 years. You have the right to remain silent. This is a setup, she shouted. Amara, tell them. Amara stood slowly, her expression calm but resolute. You took 2 months of my life. You humiliated me, drained me, threatened my child, and tried to destroy my father. You thought I would stay broken, but I'm not alone anymore. Loretta's words died in her throat as the officers cuffed her. The sound of her protests faded down the hallway. Detective Reed turned to Amara. Ms. Ward, we'll need your full statement. Amara nodded. Her voice didn't shake this time. You'll have it. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight painted the street gold. Vernon waited by the car, watching his daughter step through the glass doors with quiet pride. He opened his arms, and she walked into his embrace. It's over, he said simply. For the first time in months, Amara believed him. She looked back at the building, at the closing chapter of her fear, and felt the heavy weight lift from her chest. Everything was finally, completely over. The next morning, the news broke quietly but spread fast across local networks. Atlanta woman and her accomplices arrested for extortion and property fraud. The article showed Black Loretta Jenkins, 54, being escorted into custody, her face pale and furious beneath the camera flashes. Black Preston Jenkins, 32, remained behind bars with multiple charges pending. The story didn't name Amara directly, but everyone who knew the family could read between the lines. At home, Black Amara Ward, 28, sat at her kitchen table, still absorbing the silence. There were no more phone calls, no more demands, no footsteps echoing outside her door. Just peace, fragile but real. Her father, Black Vernon Ward, 58, entered with 2 mugs of coffee. He placed one in front of her, his eyes gentle but firm. It's done, he said. I know, Amara whispered, staring into the cup. But why do I still feel empty? Because survival and healing aren't the same thing, he replied. One keeps you alive, the other helps you live again. Amara nodded slowly. She had dreamed of this moment, the justice, the relief, but she hadn't expected the ache that followed. The adrenaline's gone, leaving behind exhaustion and quiet grief for everything lost. Her trust, her sense of safety, and the illusion that her marriage had ever been a partnership. A few days later, she was summoned to the courthouse to give her formal statement. The district attorney commended her for her strength. The detective thanked her for cooperating, and the media never got close. She walked out of the courthouse, with her father at her side, the cold wind brushing her face, and for the first time in months, she didn't flinch. That night, she packed the last of Darnell's belongings into boxes. He had chosen to stay elsewhere while the legal process unfolded. When he came to collect his things, he didn't make excuses or arguments. He simply stood in the doorway, eyes lowered. I don't expect forgiveness, he said quietly, but I'm sorry. For everything, Amara studied him for a long time. There had been a time when that apology would have shattered her heart. Now, it only settled like a soft weight in her chest. Be a better man for your son, she said. That's all that matters now, he nodded. I'll try. When he left, the apartment finally felt hers again. She went into Miles's room, watching him sleep, his small chest rising and falling in rhythm with a peace she was still learning to feel. She brushed his hair back gently and whispered, It's over, baby. We're safe now. The weeks that followed brought a slow kind of light. Amara began therapy at her father's urging, learning how to untangle trauma from habit. The panic that once lived in her chest began to quiet. She returned to work, started jogging in the mornings again, and even redecorated her apartment bright. yellows and soft greens replacing the muted tones that had once mirrored her fear. Vernon, ever the watchful protector, still checked her. Security system every few weeks, though now more out of habit than necessity. One evening, as they shared dinner, he smiled across the table. "You're getting your light back," he said. Amara smiled faintly. "I'm trying. That's all you have to do," he said. "The rest will follow." Outside, the city hummed with life. Car horns, street lights, laughter from passing strangers. For months, every sound had felt like a threat. Now it was just life again, ordinary, messy, beautiful life. Before bed, she sat by her window, looking out over the city skyline, the lights reflected in her eyes like tiny promises. She thought of her father's quiet strength, of the team that had risked so much for her, and of the little boy who believed his mom could make anything right. Amara whispered into the dark, not as a prayer, but as a statement of fact. We made it. And in that moment, she didn't feel like a victim or even a survivor. She felt like a woman reborn, one who had walked through fire and found herself on the other side, unbroken. A month later, the world outside Black Amara Ward's 28 apartment finally seemed to move at a normal pace again. The court hearings were over. Black Loretta Jenkins, 54, and Black Preston Jenkins, 32, were both sentenced. Loretta to 7 years in prison for extortion and coercion. Preston to 9 for fraud, threats, and weapons charges. The judge's words had been steady and final, echoing in the courtroom as Amara sat in the back beside her father. Black Vernon Ward, 58, quietly squeezing his hand. Darnell, her estranged husband, 33, was offered leniency after his cooperation, placed on probation and mandated to attend therapy and family accountability sessions. He had taken the deal, and for the first time in a long while, he wasn't defending anyone, only trying to understand his own mistakes. That evening, as Amara left the courthouse, reporters gathered at the steps, their microphones and cameras flashing like a wall of noise. "Ms. Ward, how do you feel now that justice is served?" Someone shouted. Amara stopped for a moment, the cold air brushing across her face. "Relieved," she said simply, "and ready to move on." Vernon smiled beside her, proud but quiet, knowing his daughter didn't need to say more. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into something resembling peace. Amara found small joys again, mornings spent reading on the balcony, Miles laughing over cereal, music filling the kitchen instead of silence. The shadows that once haunted every corner of her mind were still there, but dimmer, fading under the warmth of safety. One afternoon, she stood in the sunlight of her living room, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, watching Miles build a tower of blocks on the carpet. "You're going to knock it down, huh?" she teased. He looked up with a mischievous grin. "Not this time, Mommy. I'm building it higher." She smiled, her chest tightening with love. That simple sentence carried more weight than he knew. They had both been knocked down, but they were rebuilding stronger, steadier, higher. Later that week, she received a letter from Darnell. The handwriting was careful, the paper folded neatly. He wrote about the counseling sessions, about learning what manipulation and control had done to him, and about wanting to someday earn the right to co-parent peacefully. At the bottom, he had written, "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to be better for our son. Thank you for saving me, even when I didn't deserve saving." Amara read it twice, folded it back into the envelope, and set it aside. She didn't feel anger anymore, only a quiet acceptance that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant reclaiming peace. That weekend, she and Vernon took Miles to Piedmont Park. The grass shimmered with early spring light, and families dotted the field with picnics and kites. Vernon tossed a football lightly to Miles, who chased it with joyous shrieks. Amara sat on a bench, watching them, the breeze tugging at her curls. Vernon looked over at her and called out, "You look lighter, baby girl." She laughed softly. "Maybe I am." He nodded. "You earned that." As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of orange and rose, Amara felt something she hadn't in so long: peace without fear. The future was uncertain, but it was hers again. That night, after putting Miles to bed, she opened her journal for the first time in months. The page was blank, waiting. She wrote, "Today I chose to stop living in reaction to what they did. I choose to live for me, for my son, for peace. I don't need to be angry anymore. I just need to keep walking forward." She closed the book, exhaled slowly, and looked out the window. The city lights flickered like small constellations below. Somewhere in that glow, a new chapter waited, not born of pain, but a purpose, Amara whispered to herself. "We're free now." And for the first time in her adult life, those words felt real. Time passed, and life slowly found its rhythm again. The chaos that once haunted their days was now only a faint echo in the background of quiet mornings and calm nights. Black Amara Ward, 28, had settled into a life of balance, work, motherhood, and moments of peace she had once thought impossible. Miles was thriving. He had started elementary school, his curiosity blooming with each passing day. He loved math, puzzles, and stories about bravery. His grandfather, Black Vernon Ward, 58, had become his favorite teacher, not just for schoolwork, but for life itself. In the evenings, Vernon would sit at the dining table, showing Miles how to play chess. "Chess is like life, little man," Vernon told him. "Every move matters, and you have to think ahead, not just one step, but three." Miles grinned. "So you were like a chess player at your old job, huh, Grandpa?" Vernon chuckled. "Something like that. But my chessboard was the world." Amara listened to them from the kitchen, smiling softly as she wiped the counter. The sound of their laughter had replaced the silence that once filled the apartment, and that alone was enough to make her heart full. Darnell continued to visit on Saturdays, keeping his promise. Their relationship had changed, no longer husband and wife, but co-parents finding their own version of peace. Miles accepted it easily, never asking questions about why his parents lived separately. Children, Amara realized, had a remarkable way of adapting when love stayed consistent. At work, people sometimes asked her, "You're so beautiful and smart, Amara. Why aren't you married again?" She always smiled and answered, "Because I'm already happy." And she meant it. She didn't feel alone, not with her son's laughter echoing through the apartment, not with her father's quiet strength grounding her, and not with her own newfound self-respect. Vernon, now officially retired, still took consulting calls from his old contacts. Occasionally, former intelligence colleagues invited him to veteran gatherings where they shared stories of missions, code names, and camaraderie. He enjoyed those nights, but always returned home to what truly mattered, his family. One evening, the three of them sat at the dinner table. Miles, now 7, leaned forward eagerly. "Grandpa, will you finally tell me about being an operative? I'm big now." Vernon laughed. 7, huh? That's big enough for a few stories, maybe not all. Start now." Miles pleaded. "All right," Vernon said with a smile. "First they test you. They learn everything about you, your background, your family, your friends. Then comes the training, languages, tactics, surveillance, psychology. You have to know how to listen, how to wait, how to read people." Miles listened with wide eyes. "What languages do you know?" "English, German, French," Vernon said proudly. "A little Arabic and Chinese too. In my line of work, languages were keys. You couldn't open doors without them. Were you ever in danger?" Miles asked. Vernon glanced at Amara, who gave a small nod. "Once or twice," he said carefully. "There was a mission overseas, some very bad people. I had to disappear for a few days, cross mountains at night, and leave everything behind. It was cold, dark, and scary. But I made it. Miles's eyes sparkled. You're a hero, Grandpa? Vernon smiled gently. No, son. Just someone who did his job. The real heroes are the ones who keep protecting others every single day. Amara listened, feeling a quiet pride bloom in her chest. Her father wasn't just teaching her son stories about espionage. He was teaching him values, courage, patience, fairness, and strength. Later that night, after Miles fell asleep, Amara and Vernon sat at the kitchen table with tea. Thank you for telling him that story, she said softly. He needs to hear about strength from men who show it the right way. Vernon smiled. And you're showing him that strength doesn't always look loud, baby girl. Sometimes it's just surviving with grace. Amara reached across the table and squeezed his hand. We're doing okay, aren't we? He nodded, his eyes warm. Better than okay. We made it through the storm. The clock ticked quietly, the city lights glowing outside. In that small, peaceful kitchen, surrounded by love and safety, Amara finally felt what she had fought for all along: freedom. Not just from danger, but from fear. And as the night deepened, she whispered to herself, we're home. 2 years later, Black Amara Ward, 30, stood in the kitchen of her new home, a bright, spacious 4-bedroom condo with wide windows overlooking the park. The morning light poured across the marble counter, and the smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air. Miles, now 9 in 3rd grade, sat at the table polishing a medal that gleamed against his brown fingers. Look, Mom. He grinned. First place in chess again. Amara bent to kiss his forehead. I'm proud of you, baby. Grandpa's lessons are paying off. A knock sounded, and a familiar, warm voice called from the hallway. Permission to enter? It was Black Vernon Ward, 60, still sharp-eyed and strong. He came in carrying a pie wrapped in foil. Your mother's contribution, he said with a chuckle. She didn't trust me not to burn it. Amara's mother followed close behind, smiling wide. Soon the table was filled with food: fried chicken, sweet rolls, fruit salad, and laughter. The family gathered around as Miles showed everyone his medal, telling the story in animated bursts. Grandpa says chess is like life, he said proudly. You've got to think ahead, stay patient, and never give up. That's right, Vernon said, examining the medal. And remember, the one who thinks 3 moves ahead always wins. Amara watched them, her heart full. There was no shadow now, no tension, no fear. Just peace. Her son was thriving, her father still strong and vibrant, and even Darnell had found his balance. He was remarried with another child, and he and Amara co-parented with mutual respect. She had wished him well when he'd told her the news and meant it. After lunch, they walked to the park together. The sky was soft blue, and children's laughter floated in the air. Miles ran ahead, pointing to the trees. Come on, Grandpa, Mom. The squirrel's still here. Amara and Vernon followed slowly. He slipped an arm around her shoulders. You happy, baby girl? He asked. She smiled, the kind that reached her eyes. Yes, Dad, I really am. That's all I ever wanted. They walked beneath the sunlight filtering through green leaves. Birds sang overhead, and Amara felt the world breathing with her again. Every sound that had once reminded her of danger now felt like music. When they returned home, Vernon settled in the armchair, reading a passage from his newly published memoir, a collection of stories from his years in Army intelligence. It had unexpectedly become a national bestseller. Miles curled up beside him, fascinated by every word. Were you scared, Grandpa? He asked. Of course, Vernon said. But courage isn't the absence of fear, little man, it's moving forward anyway. Amara watched from the doorway, the moment framed like a painting. Her father's voice, her son's wonder, the warm sunlight on their faces. This was what victory looked like, Later, after everyone had gone home, she stood by her window, looking out over the quiet city. She thought of Loretta Jenkins. There was no hate left in her, only distance. The woman who once caused her so much pain was gone, and with her, the fear that used to define Amara's life. She whispered into the still air, "Thank you for the lesson. I forgive you. And I forgive myself too." In that whisper, the last remnants of the past drifted away. Amara turned off the lights and walked toward Miles's room. He was asleep, his medal resting beside him on the pillow. She kissed his cheek gently. "Good night, my heart." Then, as she turned back toward her own room, she caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the frightened version she once was. She was strong, calm, and whole. This, she thought, is happiness. Outside, the city glowed with life, 1,000 lights. Each one a small reminder that after the darkest storms, morning always comes.